Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Takeover Tuesdays. If this is your first time joining us, I'd like to share what this segment's about. So, usually it's about community and networking and just giving business owners an opportunity to share a bit about themselves and their business. And today we're definitely going to do that. However, with the current events as they are with George Floyd and police brutality and others who have been brutalized by the police, I feel like it's only natural that this is part of our discussion. It can't be ignored. So, with that said, I'm going to introduce our guest for today, Anthony Howard. Welcome, Anthony.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. And Anthony Howard is the president of Tax Geek. And he has a very interesting background, which we're going to get a bit into. So let's just jump in, Anthony. Tell us a bit about yourself before we start talking about the events of this weekend.
Sure. So I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia. I'm from the South. I came out here to Colorado by way of the military. I was stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. And after about 4 years, got out of the military, used the GI Bill and the college fund to go to college. Um, got a degree in finance in Michigan. Came back to Colorado. Went to graduate school at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. Started a career in accounting and finance with the state of Colorado. So I've had a very diverse career. Let me go back a bit. While I was in Michigan in college, I actually worked in law enforcement. I worked for the Department of Corrections out there. So I'm very familiar with, law enforcement, the techniques used in law enforcement, use of force, the use of force continuum. So when I see these types of events happening, I automatically go back to that training that I had. And yeah, it's very troubling to say the least.
So speak to me a little bit more. What was in your training that you're not seeing in these videos and or that's not adding up?
Okay, first and foremost, the use of force continuum. Every law enforcement agency goes through a block of training that pertains specifically to that. So law enforcement should use only the necessary force against someone using force against them to stop that use of force. Meaning, okay, if we're having a verbal confrontation, I'm not going to go from 1 to 6 and pull out my weapon on you. Or I'm not going to use PPCT, which is pressure point control techniques, because we're having a verbal confrontation. So I think that training is being lost in law enforcement or is being ignored. So, I mean, working behind the walls on a level 4 prison yard, um, we had no weapons, so we had to use verbal commands, de-escalation techniques, before we even thought about putting a hand on an inmate. So I'm wondering where that's being lost here out on the street. So we keep seeing this over and over and over and over again. It's troubling. It's troubling to say the least. I mean, I'm struggling with it internally, because I know how it should be done. And then we see what happens on the street, and it's terrible.
So are you suggesting that we use some or the police use some of those verbal tactics before? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't care who it is. I mean, if they're being accused of a crime or suspected of a crime, you should get the benefit of the doubt in due process. It should not be, okay, I'm responding to a call and I see this person and I don't feel threatened. But I see this person of color and automatically I feel threatened. I'm on alert. Maybe I need to call backup. That's happened to me several times. I'm 6'3", 250, so I get pulled over by the police one particular time in Vail, on vacation, and automatically they're calling backup. Like, this guy may be a problem. That's unfair. That's totally unfair.
In your experience, have you seen more people in your field do do the right thing, or have you seen this firsthand with your colleagues? Have you seen things go on that were inappropriate? And if you did, how did you handle it?
So I work with some great individuals at the Department of Corrections, and I think the standard is kind of different behind the wall. So you have this type of training, and if you don't do the right thing, you can be sued personally. So with that in mind, you want to go out and do your job correctly. So I never seen an officer abuse power in that way. We held each other accountable, um, and we used our training because it was very important to do that. Like I said, you don't have any weapons behind the wall, on a level 4 prison yard where it could be you and 95 prisoners. So you have to be able to have those conversations and use de-escalation techniques.
Well, that's really good to hear that at least it's not happening there. So that brings me to, I think it's a good time to switch over to this weekend, what we've seen across the nation, but specifically in our community. For those of you watching somewhere else, we're in Denver, and Denver, we definitely, our community has stepped it up as far as participation in protesting and voicing their concerns and their frustrations, and just all around community effort that I've seen to push back on, getting some justice for George Floyd and the officers all involved. So, what are your thoughts about first the protest? And we're going to get into a little bit about the curfews that were put upon us. I know you have some thoughts about that. I chatted with
Sure.
you briefly before this, but first, I want you to speak to the protest and what you're seeing in the news, or I don't know if you went down there or not, but what are your thoughts about all of the events going on right now?
So, I mean, in addition to working in law enforcement, like I said before, I'm a veteran. I serve this country, so I totally believe in the Constitution. And in that Constitution, the First Amendment allows us that ability to voice our opinion and raise dissent peacefully. So I'm for it. I think we all need to participate in some way, whether it's there physically or going down to our city halls. I mean, we need to let it be known that we can't stand for this. We can't stand for inequality. We can't stand for police brutality. So I'm totally with the protests. What I'm having trouble with, though, is that I think that our message is potentially being co-opted and hijacked by groups who may have a different agenda. And with that being said, I think the initial protest kind of gets drowned out. And I mean, that leads me to something totally different. I mean, there's a political aspect of this. If you think about the long game, you know, so we spoke briefly, like you said yesterday, about what could potentially happen. And so I think what we're seeing in the administration, is some plays from a playbook from the 1970s, 1980s, Nixon and Reagan, where they're going to say, all right, look at our country burning. I'm the law and order guy. Vote for me, believe in me, because I'm going to take care of all this unrest. So it kind of puts us in a situation where, all right, we were protesting this injustice. Now it's drowned out. No one wants to hear it. And what he has done is motivate his base. Now, the question is, no matter what your politics are you going to vote in November? Because right now, it could be life or death.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I mean, vote, vote, vote. Anyone who
Yeah,
knows me knows I'm an advocate. I know some folks, let's have a real moment, okay? Some Black folks say, yeah, I'm done with this, don't want to vote. We saw it happen with Trump, right?
right.
They were just through with the system, don't want to be a part of it. What are your thoughts about that? Because I know I have my own thoughts. I understand where they're coming from, folks who say that, but I completely disagree, because right now this is the system that we have, and until we dismantle it, uh, this is what we're working with. And
Sure.
I don't want another man that, like the one we currently have, in making decisions for us and
Right.
people who look like us.
Well, I mean, 2020, this is an election year. Like I said, I think this is a play out of a playbook. I think the administration was probably silent this weekend for a purpose, to allow this unrest to be seen across our nation, all over TV, to motivate his base. And I mean, what he said yesterday, whether if it was true or not, or just a threat of potentially putting federal troops on our streets. Um, as a veteran, I will tell you, you don't want that. That should be alarming to you, to have federal troops on the streets policing. That is not something that we should have. So, like I said, whether that's a threat or if that's something that he's truly going to do, um, you need to decide, what do you want your America to look like? What do you want your community to look like? We I saw some video over the weekend of people being shot with pepper ball on their porch. I think the Fourth Amendment protects us from that. Being safe in our person, being safe in our homes, being safe in our papers. So I don't care if there's a curfew or not. Sitting on your porch, you shouldn't get shot with paintball. I mean, so yeah, we have to decide. Sure, you can dislike another candidate, but if you don't vote, then you really don't have the right to say anything.
Yeah, and I think on a local level, I don't know if you saw this, but I was pleased to see and hear that our representatives and mayor and governor stood up to the comments that the president had made and said that, they were behind our community and don't want to go that route.
Right. That's awesome.
But I also know that there's other communities that may not be the case. And uh, do you have any, I guess, comments that you can share with how behind the scenes in the military that process works, if they are to go to the streets, and um, maybe a way that folks can handle that?
So I will say this. It's probably a little different now since we've been through a few wars since my time in the military. But typically, federal troops are not trained to be police officers in cities. So, if we're having problem with a municipal police force, just imagine, a force that's not trained to deal with civilians. All they have is in order to make you stay in your house or uh, go by the curfew, or I mean, it would just be chaos. And then you will have some people who know, all right, this isn't right, and they're going to be combative. I'm not going to do what you say. I mean, this is America. This is supposed to be. Uh, we're supposed to have freedom here. So I don't see any good coming of that. I'm hoping that it's just a threat, but we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. So I mean, I think about everybody who's out there and fighting for the cause, and definitely support everyone in every facet. And I know there's people doing behind the scenes on the front lines for families, kids, friends.
Right.
So definitely we just need to all continue to support each other and speak up about it.
Yes.
So I'm going to transition a little bit and talk about your business, because although everything we're talking about is most important right now, as we know, we still have to continue life. Things are still moving as much as we want to, or I want to. I mean, this weekend I was like, I'm done. I just want to hide. And it is. It's exhausting. It's tiring. It's sad. So, but as we know, we still have to keep plugging away and find a way to move forward and keep
Right.
things going. But I do encourage people, I'm no counselor specialist, but I do encourage people to definitely, listen to their bodies and what's going on, and just acknowledge that and work through that, because if you ignore it, bigger things happen.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So with your business, Tax Geek, who is your demographic? Tell us about who you help and what is the purpose of Tax Geek?
Okay. I think first and foremost, the question I get the most is, why do you spell tax geek the way you spell it? So GEAK instead of GEEK. So I am an enrolled agent, which is basically a certified tax expert through the Department of Treasury, the IRS. And so there are only three types of professionals who have unlimited rights to practice before the IRS. Those are tax attorneys, CPAs, and enrolled agents. So That's why I spell it that way. um, so what an EA does is basically, like I said, he or her is a tax expert. They're background checked through the FBI. They have continuous education or continual education, about 30 hours per year. So these folks are certified, and they know the tax law in and out. So in terms of my business, like I said, I started my career as an auditor with the state of Colorado, and it was my duty to go out and basically audit um, from Fortune 500 companies to small mom and pop companies here in Colorado. And it kind of sparked my interest because I kind of romanticized, what it would be like to be a business owner. You know, even when I went through college and, kind of thought about it, it always seemed to be something that I didn't see myself uh, doing. So after doing that for about, I want to say 7 years, I kind of got the entrepreneurial bug, and I thought, hey, maybe I have a service to offer people in the community, because what would happen would be I would go and audit these companies, and not on purpose, but they would have something wrong with their books, or that they didn't report, or they over-reported, or there was a little bit of maybe some potential fraud in their books. Not that they did it on purpose, but just the way they reported it. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I can serve those folks who are, medium to small business, where they don't have a CFO, they don't have a controller, and they just had an idea. They said, hey, I can do this as a business. They did it, but they didn't really think about everything that goes with it. So my demographic is pretty much, although I can prepare tax returns for anyone, my specific demographic are basically small to mid-sized businesses, um, high earners who are trying to minimize their tax liability, um, folks with a lot of property, multiple properties, um, folks who have a lot of investments. And so, if someone would want their taxes done by me, sure, I could do it. But if you're just a simple 1040 return with no deductions, no mortgage, you could probably do it yourself. Go to H&R Block or one of those places, or go to one of the free places.
So good advice. I like that you're specifying that they could come to you, but there's a easier way. And so for small businesses, how does that? Can you get a bit into that process of how it works when they're working through all of that?
Sure. So I think in this day and time, we're now in like a DIY culture. So you can go on GoDaddy, get yourself a website. You can go to LegalZoom, get yourself, an LLC, an FEIN, your federal identification number. Have your idea and say, hey, I'm in business. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that. So I'll just give you an example. So that person who had that great idea, and they went and got that website, and they have this awesome product, and they're ready to go, and they start making money. And end of the year comes, and they get a letter from the IRS stating, hey, we noticed that you filed an LLC. Are you going to be an S corporation, or are you going to be a general partnership? And typically they look at that letter and they say, well, I don't know what that's about, until it's time for the taxes to be due. And then that's when they're going to call someone like me, where sure, I can help you out from that point. But the goal of my business is to basically uh, approach it holistically and have a strategy from the beginning to say, okay, how is this particular entity going to help me? What's the tax liability from this specific entity? How is it going to affect my personal return? So we talk about all of those things before you even start a business, or if I'm coming in after the business has been started, we're going to talk about how to get you out of that and how to move forward strategically instead of tactically.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, do you suggest that someone would need you? I mean, at what point do they know that they need to hire Anthony?
So At any point. So part of my business, so there's basically three legs to this stool. So there's business consulting, there's tax preparation, and then there's tax representation. So under consulting, if you got that great business idea and you just don't know how to get started, I can help you from seed to fruit, meaning from the idea to revenue. On the preparation, or I'm sorry, on the representation side, that's when you've already, okay, you've gotten that letter from the IRS or some taxing authority and you don't know what to do with it. They're threatening lien and levy, or they say you have this tax bill. I also come in there. In terms of preparation, it's just not the preparation of the tax form. Is actually at the beginning of the year having a strategy. Okay, I'm probably going to hit this level of revenue. You know, how can I reduce my tax liability? So I think we kind of got the game messed up in terms of, all right, we just see how we do throughout the year and we roll the dice. Wherever we land is where we land in terms of what we pay in tax. That's not how it should be done. It should be done by planning. Okay, I could potentially meet this level of revenue. How can I reduce my tax liability if I achieve that goal? So those are the three ways that I can potentially help a customer.
That's excellent, and I like the planning piece. To me, is key in everything. Because if
Absolutely.
you don't have a plan, then at some point it's probably going to all fall apart. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow. And you're
Absolutely.
actually saving folks money in the long term by hiring you. If you, that's what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if I could, I just want to add to the business consulting side. So I also, like I said, I went to graduate school. I have an MBA. I've helped several companies start. I've helped them throughout their journey, and that's part of my service is to be that person that you can speak with. Like I said, if you don't have a CFO or you really don't want to be in the planning, you just want to be. You have a great idea for a product or service. You know it will sell, but you really don't have the expertise to market it or to potentially forecast any of those things. That's when you would call someone like me. Um, I have this conversation with my clients all the time. I say, what's the objective? What's the goal? Where do you want to be? Well, I want to make $1 million next year. Okay, well, let's start there. Let's basically start from the fruit and go back to the seed to see what we need to do in order to get there. I talk about widgets a lot. Okay, if you have this goal of $1 million, how many widgets do we need to sell to get you to that $1 million? Okay, divide that by the months, divide that by the weeks. Okay, what work do we need to do to get you to that point? If you're willing to put in that work, we can make it. But if it's just a pie in the sky, oh, yeah, I want to make that, but I don't know if I can get there, you're probably not going to get there.
Well, and I'd imagine that's where the consulting piece is good, because I know with my own business, I'm not in the tax business, but when I consult, that's that first step to find out, is this something that's attainable at the moment? Not like he's not to kill anyone's dreams, but sometimes that's that moment when they go through the consultation, at least what I've experienced is that they see, I'm ready for this next step, or I may not. I may need to get some other things together before, I move forward.
Right, exactly. And like I say, in this DIY type of environment that we have, you have some folks who are just okay with calling themselves a CEO and not necessarily trying to make revenue. I'm trying to get you to the dough. Tell me exactly what your objective is, and we'll get there.
Well, I definitely need to have some more conversations with you then. I have to go back to, if you don't mind, I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to some comments. I know we were so engaged in this conversation that we had a couple, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. We had a couple of people comment that they didn't want martial law in place. And it sounds like our community definitely is not for any of this. And someone mentioned, and I'm sorry I can't see the comments right now, I was trying to pull them up, that how can we have the same law that was meant, I believe, for the 1700s? And that was their comment. So what are your thoughts on I think they were speaking to the Constitution.
So I think they're talking about the Insurrection Act of 1807, which is, I think, what he is. I keep saying he. I think that's what the president is speaking of, or that's where he thinks his powers lie. Um, it's still there. It still can be used. I mean, there's some argument about if he can do it without the governor's permission. So I read it last night, and it basically said that the governors have to ask basically for the help of the federal government in order to do that. But there's also a section in there that states that uh, if it's declared that the states and the governors aren't protecting their people or um, aren't acting in their best interest, that he could potentially do it unilaterally. So I mean, we can talk for hours about this, but this is why it's so important. The courts are basically the last check. So the Supreme Court. So say this were to happen, and it went to the Supreme Court to determine if it was constitutional or not. What do you think is going to happen? Well, the court has been changed for a generation. The federal courts have been changed for a generation. So, I mean, these types of things are going to come up. And unfortunately, we've seen over the past few years that, okay, it's kind of like, let's do this and then see if it's legal later.
Yeah, that ask for forgiveness, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's like we're going backwards.
yeah. But the consequences are dire.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Well, before we end, I do want to definitely get your information in the comments. So, what is the best way for customers to reach out to you if they want a consultation or going beyond that? What's the best way to reach out to you and get in touch?
So first and foremost, consultations are free. So if you have a great business idea you want to just chop it up about, that's my passion. I love doing that. So you can call my cell phone, which is 719-964-3519. You can also reach me by email at ask at taxgeek, ask at taxgeek.com. And don't forget to put an E and an A instead of EE.
We won't forget that now. I'm glad you shared that because you and I didn't even get to discuss that. And I was wondering that because I do see other folks with the EE and I thought, what is the differentiation? Yeah, so thanks for
Right.
saying that. Well, I will make sure that gets in the comments. And for those of you listening, you heard free. So if you're in the beginning stages of figuring out the tax stuff as a business, I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are usually tuned into the show. So if you're listening and you're an entrepreneur or business owner, definitely reach out to Tax Geek and Anthony because as you can hear, he has a variety of services and resources to help you build your business. And I think it's key that you said you're working backwards to get to that end goal.
Yeah, I find that very effective.
Yes. Do you have any parting words before we end our segment for today?
Uh, so again, my passion is small business, and like I said, I never saw myself before, as potentially being a business owner. So if you have a great idea and you think that you could potentially make money from it, I encourage you to pursue it. Like I said, give me a call or, we can have virtual coffee or whatever it is, and we can just talk through it. And I'll be brutally honest with you if, I think that it could work or, what I've seen in the past from similar businesses. But I encourage you to go for it, shoot your shot. You're never going to find out if you don't, so um, that's it.
Yeah, I love it. You got to start somewhere, right? So
Right.
here is Anthony Howard. He is here, available, ready. I will make sure that his information is in the comments once we get off. Contact Tax Geek, GEAK, for his services, and he will gladly help you. I just want to say stay safe out there because
Thanks.
now we've got COVID-19. That's not going away as far as I know anytime
Right.
soon. That
Right.
the updates I hear from the experts. We've got that. We've got the protests, and that can be a little bit that can be scary to be around all those folks. But I understand that it's for the cause, and things have to change. So I
Right.
don't fault anybody for, being in these groups, but definitely stay safe. Uh, Wear masks, do what you can, and definitely will be thinking of you and just sending good vibes and peace and for everybody that's out there using their voice.
Absolutely.
Yes. So thank you, Anthony. And I'm sure I'll be talking to you offline again.
All right.
And Anthony's one of our loyal listeners, and I love it. He's always engaged in our weekly segment. So it's nice to actually have you on and get to chat with you the whole half hour.
Thanks for having me. Kudos to you. This platform is amazing. To have business owners, basically able to speak with the community. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And I couldn't do it without the business owners. And I just, hope that it brings to more awareness and community connection. And so until next time, stay inspired, stay safe, be well, and I will see you next Tuesday on Takeover.